There's several ways that the social services will try to catch you out before you go to the family court. We get quite a lot from people who've been told they must use the social services organisations, but the thing is, there's a conflict of interest if they're paying for them either directly or indirectly. So they're not independent, are they? Not if there's a conflict of interest between who's paying them. I'll tell you what, if there's a solicitor who obviously is within my own integrity, I would have to decide whether I was going to write a report or whatever, or do a course, whatever, in favour of my solicitor's client. If they're paying me regular money every month, I'm going to be inclined to favour the people that they're supporting. It won't be independent. The good thing about us is we only care about the children, so really we don't give a damn which adults it is. It's irrelevant to us. Our main concern is to keep the children with their natural born family, the way God intended, so that they can be looked after and cared for. So when you're doing all these risk assessments and like going for domestic violence courses and such as that, there are lots of issues about the implications of these services. For instance, I've just been talking to a guy today and I said I don't want to do a risk assessment. And we agreed there was no need for a risk assessment if there wasn't any risk. In fact, to do a risk assessment on him would have been detrimental to his case, because that would be implying that he needed help with domestic violence or whatever it was they considered to be at risk of perpetrating. So the main thing is to get your own independent assessor, to get your own independent views from people that you know and trust, preferably people who take priority in the child's best interests. One of the best examples, I should say, of this is the women's organisations. Now, what these women organisations will tell you is that men are the perpetrators, men are the violent ones, men are the really aggressive and controlling ones. Well, there's lots of reasons for that. For one thing, they've got responsibility. As a father, they have big responsibilities, and they will challenge anyone who puts their children at risk. Now, their children are more at risk from unrelated adults than they are from the parents. And if you think about it with domestic violence courses and such, there are people, women, in some of the safest areas of the UK. Domestic violence, 0.46%. What that means is every 210 years, 3 consecutive lifetimes, it means that a woman born when Napoleon was retreating from Russia, still alive today, may or may not have experienced one incident of domestic abuse. Now, I'll tell you what else they discovered as well as, and this is not just in the rural northern areas and such remote places, as islands and such. This was happening in the big cities. This was a research that was done, I believe, by it was either Strathclyde or Stirling. It might have been both universities, but it took part in the 1990s, and it was fascinating because this was before the statistics became corrupted. But the significant part, with it being a very old research, was that they went round the old people's homes, and first of all they gave them a cognitive test to see if they could remember incidents, to see what their memory was sharp enough to recall things accurately. They took details from the records to ask them questions about where they lived, their addresses and their relatives, and different things that happened in the news, that kind of thing, topical issues that were about at the time. And they did exceptionally well, because the people that had a good memory, they were asked certain questions, one of them being, can you recall any incidents of domestic violence? And these people could remember very, very accurately. And in their memory, in their living memory, they could remember very, very few incidents of domestic violence. Very rare. Why was that, do you think? Why is it that some statistics indicate that there are places where domestic violence is 0.46%? How is that? Who's protecting those women? You've probably figured it out, who's protecting them. Their husbands, fathers, brothers, grandfathers, all the whole family are protecting them, looking after their women, looking after their children. That's the role of a man, to protect and provide. Now, admittedly, you look at the kind of jobs we do. I, for example, was a roofing contractor. We must have been blinking balmy climbing up on roofs in some of the weather that we had to climb on. This was the kind of risks that men take. Men are the risk takers. Not the most violent necessarily, but we're definitely the risk takers. That is why we pay more for our car insurance. I'm just going to get this wee spider out of the way, just now. He was about to crawl in the lens. So that's the role of a man. Now, you can't say that women aren't violent. They are. On occasions they are. It's a very controversial thing. But I believe it was Jordan Peterson who cited a research that was done in the Bronx to find out what kind of violence, different types of violence there were between young, I think they were students, but young men and young women. And he says that the women tend to go for character assassination, which is exactly, excuse me, spider's back, which is exactly what the social services want. They want to slag off the fathers. They want everybody to think that men and fathers are the most violent people on the planet. They really, really want that. So they can just go to women, and there again they get the same people that they are funding. Now, this is a real bone of contention, because they get people who are unqualified, untrained, inexperienced, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. So they ask women, oh, was he violent? Did he do this? Oh, well, that's controlling behaviour. That's abuse, and all these different things, interpretations, when they're not qualified to do these things. But they will encourage women to do that because of what's called 30 pieces of silver, all the benefits you get from divorcing a man. And bearing in mind, most, I think it's 80%, between 80% and 90%, depends on your level of education. But the main partner for splitting a relationship apart is the woman. Men have more to lose. Women have everything to gain. That's just the way the law works. We've been living with a two-tier legal system for decades, generations. So we know what it's all about. And there's people who lose their business, 80-90% of their business, and the same with their property and everything else. And they're just kicked out of their home. They become homeless, and the suicide rates amongst men is horrific. If they were married. Not quite as bad if they never married. So that tells you something. So the safest, happiest families are dedicated, loving, caring families. If they come across a problem, they know how to deal with it. They resolve the issue. The families will have like a clan meeting. What we're going to do about this, that, or whatever. Meanwhile, there's always somebody in the family who'll take care of the children until this couple sort themselves out. That's why they very rarely experience any violence. That's why their children are happier, healthier, and they achieve 30% higher grades than average. That's why they achieve so much, and why they reach what we call pure happiness, pure joy in having a loving, caring relationship with each other and their family, and having the safety and comfort of being surrounded by family members, some of whom would be quite capable and quite willing to risk their lives to save you and your children. You think about that for a minute. the only man on God's earth who will put his life in front of anything that threatens his children, you or the women or the children, that would be the father and husband. So just to keep that in mind. Next time you go to a domestic violence course or whatever, just keep that in mind. And if you want to know the true statistics, it's actually between 85 and 90% of all domestic violence is perpetrated by the maternal family and friends. The chances of a father ever harming his own children are extremely rare. And we know this because it was in 2005. It was Every Child Matters. And it was a big research survey between thousands and thousands of families and children, parents. And they discovered that single dads, children of single dads, were multiple times safer, happier, and they achieved just as much as if they'd been brought up by both parents. The only slight difference was an average 5% lower grades than average, school grades than average. That was the only difference between them. The vast majority of abuse, violence, all these horrible things that people talk about or daren't talk about, they were perpetrated by friends and family of the mother. Now I'll tell you where the deception comes in. I looked after offenders for a lot of years, different types of offenders. And I won't go into the details, but I did manage to get a lot of information out of them, mainly because, I'll tell you the reason anyway, but the main reason was because I specialised in violent young men. I think it's a character flaw on my part why I should do that, want to do that. But anyway, I did look after these guys who were violent. And getting along with them, took my guitar, used to sing songs to them, tell them jokes. And I was so well into it's like sitting with these guys that were offenders, violent offenders, that people didn't know I was a member of the staff. It's a lot of stories, but what it makes me laugh was a guy came, a probation officer, and he says, where's the staff? He says, there's nobody in the office. I says, I'm here. And then he looked around and he said to this guy, he says, where's the staff? He said, he's over there, he just told you. And he didn't believe me. Then when the guy said, show him your keys, Jerry, I thought he'd wave the keys at him before he would take it, that I was actually a member of staff and not one of them. Now the good thing about that was that when I was doing my research, if I ever got one of these guys, offenders, on their own, because I used to say to the other guys, look, if you can't sleep through the night, come down and make you a cup of tea. And on occasion it would be an offender, a special type of offender, perpetrator we'll call him. And he, whoever it might be, because it was all male at that place, and whoever it might be, my funny joking face went all together, and I began to look at them in a very, very serious manner, and I would tell them about my research that I was doing, and I wanted to know how to protect them. And these were different things came out, and a lot of things came out from talking to the victims, etc., because they were all doing the same thing. They were all saying to the child, call me Dad. So when the kid goes to school and somebody says, well, who did that to you? They go, my dad did it. So that's it, it gets written down as being the dad, and it isn't the dad at all. The dad's nowhere near. They did that with little Daniel Pelka. They reported that as being, another one was, I can't remember the wee guy's name now. A young guy, anyway, I can't remember now his name, but this was another several high-profile cases where they reported it as being the father, and it wasn't the father, it was the mother's boyfriend. Anyway, the thing is that they're deceiving the newspapers, deceiving the media, they're deceiving the courts, they're deceiving the magistrates, and they're deceiving the judges and the sheriffs. They're deceiving everyone into believing that dads are the worst perpetrators ever for children, and total opposite is true. I know there's a lot of money to be gained from it, but really, is it worth sacrificing your children on the altar It's what you're doing. So look, start thinking about things sensibly. People in long-term, stable, loving, caring relationships are a lot happier and a lot safer, and the children are multiple times safer and happier than the rest of us. This is a big, very important issue, that you should not take domestic violence as being a cut and dried issue. It's not. It's very, very rare. I'll give you another quick story. There was one of my daughters had her mother over for a week. I was a single dad with my daughters. And when I got back from work, I said, "How was your mother?" And she said, "Oh, she was fine." She says, "We went sunbathing around the back, and she said her legs were covered in bruises." I said, "Well, I know she bruises easy. Why was she covered in bruises?" She says, "They're still fighting." I said, "Just back off a minute. What do you mean, still fighting?" She says, "Because they're still fighting. We've always been fighting." I said, "Why didn't you tell me this?" She says, "Well, there are several reasons, Dad. One of them being, if you'd found out about it, you would never have taken us up there again. You'd never have taken us to see our wee brother, and you would never have taken us to see a mother or anything like that. And it was about 70 odd miles away from where we live. And another thing," she says, "you would have beat 7 bells of hell out of him. I'm giving you the polite version. And you would have been put in jail because you would have damaged him." Of course I would. For all that she did, for all the kind of person that she was still the mother of my children. Or so I thought. And so that got her instant protection. That instantly got my attention and my protection. And that's how a lot of women should live, knowing that they have the loyalty of their child's father. And I'm sure if anybody was sensible about these things, these violent offences and everything against children would never happen. It used to make people laugh, because I only had 3 girlfriends when I was growing up, and I married one of them. But one of the things that kept me well behaved, well, 2 things actually that kept me well behaved. One was having a stepsister who was like the mentor to me and saying, "Well, that was so daft, you're acting silly," or whatever. And I was the one being unreasonable, even though I thought I wasn't, but apparently I was, according to her. Please subscribe if you haven't done already, and tick on the bell for notifications, and click a like if you liked the video. Thanks for listening. I do appreciate it. Thank you.